Hi, my name is Keith Cooper, and in this short video I'm going to look at making what you could call fine art prints on the Epson ET-2850. This applies to any similar EcoTank models from Epson. This is an A4 printer. I've got videos about setup and about profiling and other stuff like that, and I'll have a fuller review of it, of the whole printer, in due course. But in this instance, I'm just looking at better quality prints you might want for drawings, for scan paintings. There's a limit what you're going to get on this. This is a 4-color printer. Now, if you want photo prints, it prints, if you use photo papers, with just the 3-color inks. That means the black is relatively poor. This is not a glossy photo printer. It's not meant for that. It's meant as a sort of general home use type printer, which can print colour quite well, and it does it relatively well on matte papers. Now, the matte papers I've got loaded up in this at the moment, and I've loaded up some sheets in the back. They're just A4 sheets. You set the size on here. I've got used to doing this. I noticed when setting it up, the size of the text on this screen really is quite small. So if you have visual difficulties, I need stronger glasses to be able to see this clearly. It could be an issue if you want that. But once you get used to it, you know it, you can follow it quite easily. I don't find it any great problem. These are my sort of medium distance glasses that I use for computer work and the likes of that. Now, the papers I'm testing for this, and I've made profiles for this, and when I do the review, all the profiles I'll have made will be available for non-commercial use. Now, the two papers I'm using for this is Matte Plus 240. These are both Permajet papers. Now, these are relatively widely available papers. This one, 240 gram, there's a similar Epson matte paper, 240 gram. You'll find a lot of matte papers, smooth white papers with 240 gram as rough weight. It's not that thick. It's fairly stiff compared to, it's like a photo paper. This one here, I'll also have a quick look at doing this. This is a watercolour paper. Now, although it's 250 grams, it's actually very thick, and this is at the limit of the thickness that this will take. This will take a 300 gram smooth art paper quite well, but this 250 gram is actually a less dense paper. It's quite a thick paper, heavily textured paper, and this has, I won't say feed problems, but you need to be careful in feeding it. But anyway, those are the two papers. Now, I've made profiles of them, so I know that they're going to work on it. How to print with this? Well, it turns out I've got two Macs here. This is quite an old one. This is running an old version of Photoshop. Photoshop CS6 works fine on newer versions of Photoshop. And this is this iMac here is running OS 13. So that's the latest current operating system. This is an old Mac, but I've managed to install the new system onto it, mainly for testing purposes. This one doesn't have Photoshop on it. Now, the application that's opened up here is Epson Print Layout. This is free software, and I would suggest that if your printer is supported, and I was quite pleased to see that this range of printers is supported in Epson Print Layout. It's a free download from Epson, and Mac and PC, and it is a very easy way of printing. Now, the Epson do have documentation and assistance in using it for the settings, so I'm not going to go into all the details of margins. I will mention Borderless in a moment, but effectively I can load a picture into this. Now, on this one, I've got Photoshop running. I've opened an image in Photoshop, and I've just gone to the Automate menu, and it's loaded the image into Epson Print. It's opened Epson Print Layout and transferred the image over to it, ready to print. This one, I've actually just dropped the JPEG onto the open application window here. You can choose. So this is just using Epson Print Layout. This one's got Epson Print Layout and Photoshop. Now, you can use any other application that exports files of the type that this will print. I'm using JPEGs here. They're saved at maximum quality, so I'm not getting any difference from what I would get if printing directly from 16-bit files from TIFFs or something like that. I believe you can open TIFFs in this. This is a Photoshop file which I've just the export process, when you go through the automate menu, takes care of the conversion. It just opens that image in Print Layout. Now, paper, I've loaded it up in here. I've set the size, set the type to matte here. In fact, the matte setting is the only art setting. Doesn't matter what paper you're using, you have to use the matte setting if you want to print better quality images on art type papers. If you use any of the photo papers, the black ink won't be used, and your pictures, I won't say they look dreadful, but they certainly won't look nearly as good as if you're using all four colours. Now, I've got an Epson ET-2850, which is the A4 version of the ET-8550 I tested a while ago. I've got that to look at, and I will be doing a comparison of the two, just in case you were wondering at some point. But I'm going to finish off looking at this one, then I'll get the 8550, sorry, the 8500, and look at all the various options. I would say that already, if you have an 8500, the profiles I created for the 8550, the bigger printer that takes 13-inch width, so A3 plus papers, the profiles for the 8500 also will, for the 8550, will also work for the 8500. They're essentially the same printer, much like the P700, P900 are just different size printers. What goes on inside them is essentially the same. But anyway, we've got this one here. I've got this set. Now, as it's set up here, I've selected the paper, Epson Matte. I've selected the size. I'm not doing Borderless at the moment or anything. I will come back to Borderless. I've just set this for standard quality. I would normally print these maybe at the high quality, but it is quite a bit slower to do it. Bear that in mind. If you want to print cards, and cards work perfectly well for this, pre-creased cards, you won't be able to stack many of them, and they will take quite a while coming out. So if you think, oh, I can set myself up a card business using a printer like this, think carefully what happens if somebody wants 100 cards off you. You might not choose a printer like this for it. But you know, for small runs and for your own use, it works fine. Now I've got this set, I've just set it to automatically scale here. I've set the borders. Now I'm choosing an Epson profile I've created here in the profile settings. And in this particular one, I'm using the relative colorimetric rendering intent. I've noticed with this printer that different images print differently using the different rendering intents. So you may want to experiment with that. That's with my profiles. The effect is not so noticeable with other profiles. But then again, Epson don't provide many profiles for this. So it's a basic printer you got here. It's a relatively cheap to use printer because of the ink tanks, but it's just 4 colours, or 3 if on glossy paper. So let's just press print on this one here, and it should come through. There we go. It says that it's coming through onto here. Now the printer will wait. Both of these are connected wirelessly, as far as I remember, as is this. So it's all going to go through that. It's not quick. You're not going to expect a rapid change there. So it says it's sending the print data. Yeah, it says it's done. Hopefully this will light up fairly soon and it will start printing. There we go. Drawn a paper sheet in. I've got about 5 sheets in the back here, and it's okay with those. This is at the standard print setting. This is faster, just so I can show it here on the video. It takes quite a bit longer to actually print using the high quality, and there is a slight difference. You'll need a good quality image, but you will see a bit of a difference. Well, the print's on its way out. You do need to look relatively closely at the image to see the difference between the high quality and the standard on this. With this printer, if you've not used it for a while, it doesn't clog or anything like that, but I always suggest running on plain paper a nozzle check first. Now, runs the nozzle check quite a. If I've not used it for a day or two, I will do that. But that's just because I'm running all different sorts of papers and things through it. You'll find that over a while, it doesn't make much difference at all. It just works. It's a home office printer, and they're designed to be relatively robust. Now, you can always tell when it's near the end because it pauses for a few seconds, thinks about things, and then off it goes, and out comes your print. Now, it's matte paper, so it's always going to be slightly limited to what you'll get from photo paper, but with the right images, that's a print quality I'm quite happy with. Now, that's printing off that for using this paper here, and that's printing Mac version using Epson Print Layout on the latest Mac version. This is an old version. This is 10.13, I believe, so it's quite an old system, because this is an old PowerBook that I'm running it on. That's it opened up in Photoshop. Now, I can just go to that. I just go to the export, and there's the image has appeared in there. You'll notice there is a slight border around it. Now, the expansion settings, it's put scale to fit here, so it's just enlarged the image. If you're going to print borderless, you need to set it as borderless as a paper type. And if I set paper source from standard to borderless, you can see it loses the border there. Now, depending on the image aspect ratio, it needs expanding to fit the page. Now, if I go to a different image that I've got in Photoshop, now this particular one I printed directly from the Photoshop settings, from Photoshop printing. I didn't go via Epson Print Layout. Works just as well. Likewise, if you were printing from Affinity Photo or something, this would be the normal print dialog you'd get for that, or from something like Lightroom. Now, I tell people that if they're getting into doing this, download a copy of Epson Print Layout. It's free, it's very easy to use, it is designed for print. You can do multiple copies, there are various options and things, right? You can save presets for it. So that is a print that's done just now. There is a borderless print, printed on this same paper here. Now, there are no problems with that. It has expanded. Now that means that you lose some of the image at the edge, so be careful with the expansion settings on it. There are options here for changing the amount of expansion. It does show you quite well in the Epson Print Layout what it's going to do. I can see there now. I know this picture works very well, but that's the image. This is a scene in a building in Leicester. This was a tree in Colorado in the fall. The colours were like that. Now, this is one that works particularly well on with pigment inks on a nice paper. But given what we've got, the relatively limited inks in this and the where the market it's aimed at, that's a nice print. Borderless works perfectly well. What about the thicker paper that I mentioned? Well, this is the watercolour paper. This is at about the limit of what you can put in this. You put a sheet in this, it will draw it in, and then it stops. You actually need to press this to push the sheet in to get it to bite. It's about the limit of thickness of what this will take. As I say, fine art papers that are thinner than this seem to work okay. I mean, the grams weight of a paper is the weight per unit area. It doesn't tell the density of the paper makes a variation as to how thick the paper is, and this is at as I say, about the limit. So there's a borderless print made of that. It's bordered on an art paper. What happened the first time I printed it? Well, I didn't push the paper in properly, and what we've got is a tiny white border on the top. Now, that's easy enough done. It's just a bit of practice. Second print I made on different papers, on different image, but on this bit of paper, no problem whatsoever. You need to push the print in to get it to work, and that's something you need to be wary of. Doesn't matter if you're doing one or two, but imagine if you've got a dozen prints to do and you can only load them one sheet at a time and you have to push it manually in to get it started. You're printing at the high quality setting, so it takes quite a bit longer, and I've reduced the print time, the standard print time here in the video, just to cut a bit of time out of it. You're limited to what papers you can use and stack them, but this is a matte paper. Works very nicely. You can get a preset card on paper that's not much thicker than this, so you could put a few in there. Rather nice results, better than I would have expected from a basic 4-ink printer. The profiling helps, if you want to get into doing this sort of stuff, and I say you can, scan drawings you can print as well, scanned watercolours and the like on papers like this. Remember, you're not going to get the punch of photo papers, but then you don't necessarily want that. Epson Print Layout works very easily and it's free. Now, I hope that's of some help in people looking at printers like this. Please do ask if you've got any questions, because as I say, it's people's questions that give me ideas for other videos on all sorts of subjects. Have a look. I don't just cover printing, cover all sorts of stuff on the channel. If you found it interesting, please do subscribe to the channel, and as I say, I genuinely do appreciate questions. So thanks for watching.